Okay, we are recording. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. If everyone doesn't mind, obviously muting their lines during the presentation, it would be greatly appreciated. My name is Melissa Shoemaker, and I represent the APMP Chesapeake chapter. Thank you all for taking time out of your day and sacrificing your lunch break with us. It is much appreciated. Our Chesapeake chapter serves proposal capture, business development, and graphics professionals through professional development, training, and networking opportunities. We are based in Maryland, but welcome members from all over the U.S. and internationally. Before we jump into today's webinar, I want to take a moment to thank the organizations that help make these programs possible. Please hold. Here we go. Our chapter is incredibly fortunate to have the support of several corporate sponsors, including organizations like SMX, Lowfield Consulting Group, and AutoGen AI, whose continued support enables us to provide high-quality programming, professional development, and networking opportunities for the proposal community. We truly appreciate their partnership and encourage you to learn more about the great work they're doing in our industry. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We do have a few webinars coming up soon. The next one will be held on May 6th at noon, titled Understanding the High Confidence in Federal Proposals. This will be hosted by Dr. Bob Frey, which will focus on leveraging what GAO's decisions say to strengthen your proposals. And we also have coming up on June 3rd at noon, we will have Mike Rice presenting on how oral presentations change evaluation dynamics. Our chapter does host regular monthly events and webinars designed to bring industry leaders together to share insights and help us all grow professionally. So please be on the lookout for future opportunities hosted by the Chesapeake chapter. Now, without further ado, let me introduce today's host, Becky Thompson. Becky is a leadership development consultant, author, and former senior federal executive with more than 25 years of experience in talent management, workforce development, and organizational leadership. She is the founder of Becky Thompson and Associates LLC, where she helps leaders and organizations build emotionally intelligent, resilient, and psychologically safer workplaces. Becky is certified in EQI 2.0 and EQ 360, trained in mental wellness and peer support, and draws on both research and real-world leadership experience to translate complex human challenges into practical, people-centered strategies. She is also the author of Tiny Teachers, a leadership book inspired by lessons in resilience, emotional intelligence, and connection from everyday life. So with that, I will let Becky take it away.
Hey, thanks, Melissa. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
And you're going to share my slides for me?
I sure am.
Okay. I will mention quickly, since you brought up my Tiny Teachers book, there is a small emotional intelligence assessment at the end of that book. If anybody buys the book and takes that assessment and shoots me an email with their scores, I will send them and mention that they got it from this webinar. I will send them some information through the email, actions that they can take based on what their score is on the emotional intelligence assessment. So just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. And can everybody see my screen with the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Alrighty.
I cannot see the slides. Interesting. All I see is your face, Melissa.
Oh no.
Really big.
Oh no. Maybe there is can you do like is there could you scroll over to the top where everyone's faces are and see anything?
Interesting. Probably because I'm used to Zoom and I just have not used this in a while. Audio, video, no. More. Is there a view button on here? See, there is in Teams. I'll bring them. I can bring them up on my screen and just go through them with you.
Okay.
I can see everybody's picture, but I can't, and you're front and center, but I don't see the slides.
Yeah, that is strange. Is there a little tab at the top of yours that says
At
anything?
the top left, there should be a button that says meeting. When you click on that, it will you can there should be meeting and then next to it Melissa Shoemaker's screen. And if you
Yeah,
click
like
on
I think it says
Shoemaker's
my
screen,
screen on my computer. It says my screen with a little yellow
yep.
button. You got it?
Okay. Success. Thank
All right,
you. I
perfect.
think usually when I use Zoom, I actually use it through the web browser, and it's different on the web browser. This time I actually downloaded the app. So, anyway, thank you. I really wanted to give you a purpose slide because sometimes people think that we're counselors and we're not counselors. I'm not telling anybody that they need to be a counselor as a leader. It's not about diagnosing the trauma, but you need to understand what the impact is. When we say psychologically safer workplace, a lot of folks will go into, we don't need a safe space to think. We don't need a safe space to cry. We don't need a safe space to complain. And that's not what I'm talking about when I say psychologically safer. Uh, I'm saying from a leader perspective, you want people in meetings to feel safe speaking up and not shot down every time they say something because you're in a time crunch and you don't have time to listen to them. Or sometimes you have an extrovert who wants to talk and talk and talk, and they always want to put their ideas out there, which is great. But you've got to give these folks who may be an introvert a safe space to be able to speak up too. Because you might be losing a lot of good ideas because you've been in a meeting for an hour and your introvert sitting over here going, well, if he'd shut up or she'd shut up, I'd speak up. I've got some good ideas here. You might be missing out on a lot of those if people don't feel psychologically safe in their head to speak up because they're either going to be, well, we've got this under control. We need to move ahead because we've been here for an hour. Or quite frankly, if you've been in a meeting for an hour and you're like, I can introduce my idea now, but if I do, we're going to be here for 2 hours and I've had enough. So that's what I mean by a psychologically safe place for people to talk. You want people to be able to do that and speak up and get all of the ideas that you can. So next slide, please. So here's the objectives of today. You want to be able to recognize the signs when people are struggling. Sometimes, you get people who are high performers and they're working really well and their behavior might change or they might be calling in sick more often. You want to be able to recognize when people might be struggling in some way who don't typically struggle in that way. You want to recognize the impact that they can have on people in the workplace. People struggling at home, that definitely has an impact on what your work is. Um, you know that for yourself, but as leaders, we need to recognize that in other people as well and understand how it's something that might be happening at home or something that might be happening at work. We've all had that stressful boss or a trauma-inducing boss that has caused us to kind of fall off track at work. And as leaders, we need to be able to understand that. I do often get the question, well, what if the boss is the one that's causing it? And you need to find another safe person that you can talk to that might be able to influence. And just a quick personal story is I worked for somebody for 9 years and she was totally trauma inducing all the time, but I gave it a good shot. I think 9 years is a pretty good shot to work for somebody.
Hmm.
Um, I went up and around her and talked to people, and they're like, really? She doesn't act like that, with us. Not understanding why she acts like that with you. And I'm like, it's not just me. Um, so I stayed there. I worked at this place. It was the Corps of Engineers. I worked there for 13 years. And I finally left when she picked up a file folder and threw it at me because she didn't agree with something I said. And
Wow.
it was either leave or get in some kind of trouble because that's not, the kind of behavior that I'm going to handle, I'm going to deal with. So um, that's what I mean by understand the impact, what's going on. If the other leaders around me, and quickly I ran into our two-star general, which was our deputy commander, on the day before my last day. And he said, how you doing, Becky? And I said, well, tomorrow's my last day. He said, you've been here a really long time. I said, I know, I've been here 13 years. He said, there's a lot of turnover down in your office. What's going on? I said, well, if you have time between today and tomorrow, I'll tell you. And he sent his aide down a little while later and he listened to me. But he looked at me and he said, I'm not going to insult you by asking you what I can do to keep you. We should have worried about that while you were here. You've already committed somewhere else. But I will commit to handling it. And she was kind of forced into retirement. And after 4 years, I went over and I was the director of workforce development at NAPC. They called me and said, your job's open again. Do you want to come back? And I did go back and I worked there 2 more years and then I retired from the Corps, which was my goal. I wanted to retire from the Corps of Engineers. So that's what I mean by the impact. It could be home, it could be at work, but you have to recognize the signs and be able to understand what the impact is with these people at work. And it's a big leadership responsibility. And from what I know from my sister Sherry working in this field, that's not something that's easy to do because even if you're a leader, I understand that most of you are pretty much action officers and working the work as well. But it's super important if you want these folks to stay in this field, which is, I know, a high volume field and a high stressful field. I get that as well. Understand what those impacts are on people at work. Provide the support you can and take appropriate action. The next slide, please.
Mhm.
Psychological safety setup, I'm just going to say sometimes we talk about things in a psychological safety or crisis environment that is uncomfortable for people. I want to tell people participation is optional. Your chat is encouraged. If anybody has any questions, please come off mute and ask the questions. Nobody's asked to share personal trauma. I share personal stories because you guys don't know me. You don't know the people I'm talking about. And I think a personal story on something that's going on makes it more relatable and actionable after we get off of this call. But if something comes up and you don't want to talk about it, step away. And here we're going to focus on workplace impact, understanding that there's personal issues that impact you at work. That's the focus of what we want to do here is focus on how this impacts you at work. And the reason I always put this in here when we're talking about psychological safety is that same supervisor that I was just talking about. We had to have our suicide prevention training at work one time, and it was about 2 weeks after a cousin of ours had died by suicide. And they brought up a
Oh,
video of a mother who had just lost a child in the military to suicide. And I started bawling. I'm like, I can't handle this. And I got up to leave. And this woman actually grabbed my arm
oh
and
no.
said, You need the credit for this. You need to stay. And of course, I kept walking. I'm like, I don't. I just don't. This is not life or death for me. It's not gonna, cancel my job. So I always tell people if you don't feel safe here, we'll figure it out. And how I've handled that in another incident, our sexual harassment training, a young lady that worked for me, she was actually sexually assaulted walking home from work one day. And
Oh no.
the sharp training came right afterward. And she said, I can't sit through that right now. So what I did and how I handled it is I called our sharp coordinator and said, I have, an employee who this just happened to. She can't take the training right now. However, I've given her our EAP information. I've given her resources to help her. He said, well, she's already taken the training if you've already given her all of that. He said, we'll just give her credit and give her a waiver for this year. So that's how my supervisor could have handled it, but that's not how she handled it. So again, that's why I always throw this slide in there. If you can, next slide, please.
Mhm.
And what is PTSD and what it is not. PTSD, people always think that's combat related. You're talking about people in the military. That's not always true. It's not a weakness. It's not always combat related. And often it's high performers. And again, I am going to relate it back to your profession because I've never done it, but Sherry and I've been sisters for my whole 55 years. So, and she's been doing this for a long time. So I have seen um, what this can do and what your jobs entail. So you probably often do cope silently. I hope you have somebody in your life that you can download on, like Sherry does, because I know she can call me anytime she wants to. Um, there's workplace relevant triggers, high pressure deadlines, the authority dynamics, conflict, sudden changes. I had an employee last year who the sudden change in the government just completely threw her off. She was just convinced she was going to lose her job. And how it came out is perfectionism. She wanted everything to be perfect. She was driving me crazy because she was calling me many times a day going, I'm like, you've got to quit calling me. I've got to get this work done. Yes, there's a lot of changes going on. And I finally scheduled a half an hour on our meeting and I sat down and talked to her. Come to find out is she grew up poor. Now I told her, you don't have to tell me what's, your personal stuff, but I need to know what's going on. Something's bothering you and it's impacting your job. And she said, growing up, she was very poor. She did not have running water. She did not have an indoor bathroom. And her biggest fear was losing her job and being poor again. And she said, I know it's unreasonable. I've prepared for retirement. I do have a savings. But that was PTSD for her. Her biggest fear was being poor. And with, they were cutting all of the government jobs. She had been in the government for 30 years and she wasn't ready to retire. And she's like, I don't know what to do. I'm not ready for this. She was terrified in her head, I'm gonna lose my job and be poor again. So when we talked through it and we would meet, I would meet with her every morning for about 5 minutes just to give her that. Because if we're in the building together, she lives in Florida. If we were in the building together, I would have stopped by her cubicle every day and said, "Hey, how you doing this morning?" So I started treating her like that. That was what we needed to do. And every morning I would call her and say, "Hey, how you doing today?" And I was very transparent with her. This is the meetings that I heard went on last night. This is what happened. And if I was not told this cannot be shared, I shared it. They were having night courts in the federal government where I worked, where all of them top leaders would get together at night and discuss, what jobs are being cut, where they're going to move people, what budgets are being cut. And if my boss came in the next morning and told me about it, I would share it because if they said this isn't, if they said this is a secret, of course I can't. But if they didn't tell me, I was very transparent with my staff so they could plan. And a couple of them took the early out with me. A couple of them stayed. I still hear from them almost daily, but it was very important to make her feel safe and understand that she truly did have PTSD. Was she in the military? No. Nothing was combat related, but she grew up in a very poor environment and it affected her. And it came out when she thought she was going to lose her job.
Yeah, this is definitely very relatable, I think, for most people.
Yeah. So next slide, please. So this is just a slide to show you how things might show, but what actually might be happening. These are things that you can look for and ask people starting to miss deadlines. I mean, what would you do if you had a person who was an extremely high performer? They started missing deadlines. They overreacted to feedback. And again, this was with the young lady I was just talking about. This was her. She overreacted. She goes, "Oh, do you think it's wrong? Do you think I need to fix it?" Because she wanted to be perfect because she didn't want to be on that chopping block. And which is why, did she have a freeze response, threat perception? Definitely. Um, so I was able to help stabilize her and help her feel more comfortable before I left. That being said, I've talked to her twice today because she's feeling a little stressed right now. She also shared with me that she had Asperger's syndrome. I knew she was a little quirky, but I didn't know that she was slightly autistic. I didn't know that. And it was frankly none of my business. She worked her behind off. Um, but she did share that with me. And unfortunately, when I left, people aren't getting to know that about her. There's not a leader left that they just say she's weird. Well, she is weird, but we're all a little bit weird. But
Mhm.
her quirks are explainable and she's a high performer. So maybe look at that instead of what you consider she's not like everybody else, because she's definitely not. Um, so again, leadership lens frame, before you label people as difficult, ask what might be driving it. I'm not going to say there's not somebody who just is difficult just to be difficult, because we know there are. But you usually know who they are. Um, but if somebody you notice a change, a difference in somebody, certainly before you say, "Hey, they're just being difficult with me," um, try to figure out what that driver is, what it is that could be causing that for them. The
Becky,
next.
do you have any
Go
experiences in that area um, related to remote work? Like, and you might not always see it, like any cues or things that um, you can think of that might help us identify some of those things from, a remote situation.
Yeah, I had when I went back to the Corps of Engineers, interestingly enough, one of the employees that worked for me there worked at NAVC while I was there. So I knew her name, but I knew her as being difficult because I was at the enterprise level at the kind of the chief learning officer level, and she was down in one of our organizations, one of our shipyards, and she was a training coordinator, and she was remote. And she had an employee, and again, this is another little PTSD moment. She had a supervisor who didn't trust the remote. So she wasn't as effective as a remote employee as she wanted to be because she was so overconscious of it that she spent more time documenting what she did in her time. And I seriously think she probably spent an hour to two some days making sure that she was accountable for her time. And I'm like, if as a leader, if you don't trust these folks to do it, then you need to handle that through a performance issue. Um, the reason I say that is because she could have been a high performer, but she was not. And part of it was her fault. Part of it was a leadership problem. Because when I went in and Michelle started giving, she was documenting her time in 6 minute increments. If she switched from one thing to another, she would stop what she was doing to record it
Oh, wow.
because she said, well, the system takes it in 6 minute increments. I'm like, but I don't want to approve it because now you're wasting my time reviewing your time to see what you're doing. And I showed her one day how much time it took her to do it and how much time it took me to do it. I'm like, we're spending hours a week on your time. And I had 60 people that worked for me at the core. I didn't have time. So, I mean, a lot of it is, Sherry, you ask strategies. Trust, empower people to do what they're doing and handle it through performance. If you know what their tasks are and you know what their deadlines are and they're not meeting it, then that's a performance issue. That's not a remote work issue. And unfortunately, that's the federal government has that wrong right now, right? They returned the office for everybody. Um, and it's a huge problem. So, I mean, strategies to deal with it is I would give everybody, hey, I know what everybody's tasks are, and I had a little task sheet that everybody could access. And I'm like, this is your main task that I know you're working on. And I would have a little spot where they could give me a note. And I said, I don't want it every day because I don't have time to read it every day. But once a week, I want you to go in there and update me where you are on this task. And that's it. And I knew where the deadlines are. If the deadlines were being met, I had no problems. Michelle would tell me if she was going to the bathroom, if she was going outside to walk around her block. I'm like, I don't care. If your deadlines are being met, I do
Meeting
not
is being
care.
recorded.
Oops,
Sorry about that.
that's okay. So, um, that's where I am with that, Sherry. If that, I hope I answered your question. You know me, I could talk about this all day.
Mhm.
The next slide, please. This is just a little model I like to give people because it's something that you can print out and sit on your desk to remind you for psychological first aid. Remember last, you're going to listen without fixing. That's what we did with the Corps of Engineers. My last deployment as a peer supporter with the Corps of Engineers last year before I retired was the January plane crash into the Potomac. Because I was here in DC, I was called to deploy to the riverfront and I stood out on the pier at Gravelly Point. And in the morning at 6 a.m., when our divers were going in to help with the recovery efforts, I was standing there to hand them a sandwich or talk to them and tell them, I'm here to support you. Um, there wasn't anything that I could do for them but listen to what they had to say. And then I was there again at 7, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening to go in their debrief tent and hear what they saw because it was helpful for them to get it off their chest. When you're thinking about something and it's bothering you and it's right in the front of your head, it's statistically shown if you talk about it with somebody, just get it off your chest. It moves from the front of your brain to the back of your brain. So it's not that it goes away, but it becomes something that you don't think about constantly and it helps you cope better. So the L in there is just listen without fixing. That's something if some of us are married, you understand a spouse when you tell them something, they always want to say, well, you should do this, you should do this. And you have to go back and say, hey, I'm not, I've been married for 35 years. I have the time. I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to shut up and listen to me. That's not the nicest way to say it, but uh, sometimes they just need to shut up and listen. So as a leader, we need to learn that. I was, had a meeting with my boss one day and it was during COVID. So we were virtual and he texted me and said, hey, I have one of your teammates in my office, and this guy's child had just came out as transgender, and he was talking to our boss about it. And he said, he's telling me some personal stuff, and he said, I understand that what we're talking about is important too. He said, so tell me when you have time in the next couple of days and get back on my calendar. And to me, I mean, this was a super, super nice guy, super emotional intelligence, right? He just told this guy in his office, your personal issues are important. But he also told me, hey, I know what you have to say is important. I know our meeting was important. But he even took that further. But he also told me my time was important, not by saying, hey, just wait until I call you. He said, give me some times in the next couple of days when you're available. And he was my boss. He could have said, hey, I'll call you when I'm done. Make yourself available for me. He did not do that. It's always important to listen to what people are telling you. I mean, you can't be their ear every day where they come in every morning and download their personal life on you. But occasionally letting somebody get something off of their shoulders is helpful to keep them productive, which we all know is what we need to do is keep people productive so we can meet our mission. That's our goal at work. Um, Acknowledge the impact. You can acknowledge the impact on somebody else and what their feelings are without agreeing with them, right? You can validate their right to feel that way. And you might be thinking in your head, I'm like, this is minor. This isn't a big deal. If it's a big deal to them, you can acknowledge the impact to them, validate it, and say, hey, I can understand how you would feel that way. Even if it's something at work where somebody and they're like, oh, they hollered at me, they hurt my feelings. And you might think, toughen up. That's not something you want to say. You want to acknowledge that that person made them feel a certain way and it impacted them and tell them, hey, I can see how that would make you feel like that. So validating somebody's feelings, it's very empowering to them. It's like, okay, I didn't really overreact. But then you need to stabilize it. You can say, "Hey, I hear that how that impacted you. I understand that you didn't like to be talked to like that way, and maybe you need to talk to that person and have them handle it themselves. Don't jump in and be the person who fixes it for them. Just say, hey, go back and talk to them and say, hey, I didn't appreciate that. But you need to tell them, okay, but we need to get past this, and this is what the expectations are. We still have a job to do. We still need to get this done. And set boundaries with them. You don't want to, again, be their counselor because you don't have time. And make sure they know the work still needs to get done. And if it's something that's a big deal and you think somebody needs resources, like the person that was sitting there, he was crying. His son, he had 4 sons. His oldest son had came out as transgender. So he said, now after 23 years, I've got to say I have a daughter. So it was traumatic for him. So we did make sure he had the resources that he needed, the free EAP resources and things like that. You want to transition the support to, okay, I listened to you. Now here's your long-term support because you can't be it. Um, so that is the point of that last model. So it's something that you can remember, print, put on your desk and remember. Another model, if you've ever heard of it, is I don't have it in here, but it's the ACE model, which is ask, care, escort. If you think somebody might be in a really bad crisis, somebody who's suicidal, somebody ever mentions it. If you ever are in a position at work and you think somebody is suicidal, don't say, hey, are you thinking about hurting yourself? It's hurting yourself and killing yourself are two different things. Don't ever be afraid to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of suicide? Um, and the ask, care, escort, it's ACE, is you ask them, provide the immediate care that they need and then escort them to somebody 911 if necessary, but whatever that is. And those are just two little models that you can remember. Where we are. Psychological, I'm talking without looking at the slides, so I'll make sure that I'm on the same page. Psychological first aid for leaders. I think we've gone over some of this. What things you can say. I've noticed you're overwhelmed. How can I support you? You don't need to share details. You always want to tell somebody, and I'm not asking you for your personal information. Just share enough that I can help you. I want to be here for you, and always make sure that they know it's confidential. You're not going to share their business around. And let's talk about what helps you do your best work because you always want to bring it back to work because that's where we are. You're not, again, their personal counselor. How can I get you to be productive as you can be so I don't have to do it for you, so somebody else doesn't have to do it for you? And that's our goal is to get them, again, psychologically safe and productive and getting their work done. And what not to say, just toughen up. Everyone's stressed. Why are you reacting like this? Again, yes, everyone might be stressed, but somebody might have a different reason for feeling that overwhelming stress. Somebody might have something going on in their personal life that's causing that. A workmate that's causing them more stress than somebody else. And we need to figure out what that root cause is. Otherwise, they're not going to be productive and you're going to do it. You're just going to do the work. Um,
Right.
and you don't want to say, why are you reacting like this? Again, like I said, it might not be how you would react in the same situation, but it's very real to them. So you can validate their feelings. And sometimes people just need you to say, Oh, well, yeah, I can see why you'd feel that way. They just want to validate they're not being a crybaby. Even if you in the back of your head you think they are, you're not going to get them back to productive work if they continue to feel that way. The next slide, please. So boundaries and escalation. Again, I just like to reiterate certain things. So you're supporting, not treating. So you're a leader, you're supporting what's going on with them. Again, your goal is to get productive and get the work done. You're not treating anybody, which is why I say ask for the ACE model or the last model. The last thing is to escort them to support, or the T is to transition them to support because you don't want to be that constant support. You're observing patterns, not diagnosing. Know when to escalate. Whatever you have available in your organizations, whether your HR resources, your employee assistance program, if there's safety concerns, certainly get them somewhere where they're safe. Red flags requiring immediate action. Of course, it's threats to self or others, severe impairment at work, expressions of hopelessness. I ran our family readiness program at one point at the Corps of Engineers, and I worked with our Corps chaplain a lot. We had a command surgeon. I worked with him a lot. And we had a lot of deployed civilians, which is why we had a family readiness program. Any given time, we could have almost 2,000 of our civilians deployed just because of the nature of the Corps' business, which, responding to floods and hurricanes and tornadoes and things like that, and um, dewatering where flooding and things like that happen. So we had a lot of deployed civilians. So we did have a call one time into our office. A supervisor said, one of my employees is on travel and he's in this hotel, and he called another employee and said that he was threatening suicide. So the employee didn't know what hotel he was in, but he knew his supervisor was. So he called his supervisor. The supervisor called 911, but then he called the family readiness office. So I got our command surgeon involved and our chaplain involved. And coming to find out, unfortunately, this man did complete suicide while he was on travel for work.
Oh,
Um, but we took all of the steps that we could do to make sure that somebody got there to help him. And then afterward, he had a wife who did not speak English. He had two small children. So our family readiness program jumped in and helped her get childcare and helped her coordinate a funeral and things like that. So um, yeah, if somebody is threatening or you think somebody might be in that, just don't take it seriously. You'd rather make somebody mad by sending somebody to check on them than not. Um, anyway, that's kind of a
Yeah.
downward topic, but it happens.
So how do you recommend, as leaders, communicating it down the chain, to our other managers and just so that the team collectively is kind of looking out for one another. When someone might recognize it but not want to confront or address it themselves. How do we communicate it to our teams to bring it forward?
So, on a smaller scale, we had what we called our SISM team in the Corps of Engineers, which was our Crisis Incident Stress Management team. And that's what I was a part of. And it was larger. Again, we had 40,000 people to support. We've had millions of acres of parklands and rivers. So we had a lot of drownings by little kids in our rivers. So anytime we had a death in the Corps, we sent a team of two out. So, I mean, I had deployed to several things like that. But maybe have a little mini team and say, hey, this is our safe person that manages this information. For more information, call this. Put together a few slides on psychological safety and send it to everybody on your team or every subordinate manager and say, if you have any issues like this, create a little cadre of two or three people who are safe to call and have a little bit more experience in it. Um, you can get somebody who is certified in psychological safety to come in and give psychological safety briefings if you like the certification, or share these slides with folks. I mean, that's nothing's sacred here. Share it. Say, watch this, and tell people who to reach out to. I would have like a little share drive or something with a list of folks who have a little bit more training in psychological safety. Just you, Sherry, and for being on this briefing, right? You've
Hmm.
learned a little bit more than you knew. Put yourself on there and say, hey, I'm one. Christina, you're in the same group with Sherry. You're two people within SMX that somebody could reach out to for more information if they were afraid to talk about it. And you could say, hey, okay, if you want to talk to them, here's a few things you could do and offer to be on the phone with them when they do it, or, just
Right.
offer to help them. I would just do some little fact sheets and put them somewhere everybody can access it and say, hey, if you're ever in a situation where you're questioning somebody who works for you or in your group or within the company that might be struggling with something and you don't know how to talk to them, here's some resources for you.
Okay. Thank you.
I was
Well,
going to ask a question. So, this is not SMX because SMX is great, but my sister's company, there was a culture where they would say, everything is a safe place. You can come to your manager, you can ask questions, and always don't be afraid to ask questions. Well, whenever she did ask a question, she would be talked about, chastised, and so she got to the point where she had the freeze response that you mentioned,
mhm.
that she couldn't be productive because she wasn't able to safely ask for help when needed. So how does someone go about trying to fix that kind of broken culture?
I mean, it's obviously a whole cultural problem and it starts with leadership. So
Hmm.
somebody needs to address it with the most senior folks and they should invite people. I mean, I'm not saying myself, but people like me to come in
Yeah.
and give these types of briefings. So people
Yeah.
sometimes just, they bring their personality to work, but never, or people are promoted because they're really good, productive workers and never get the type of leadership training that they
Training.
need.
Yeah.
Or sometimes that,
Right.
they'll have leadership programs and they never actually bring in folks to give them leader development stuff. They just
Mm.
kind of get their leadership training from other leaders in the organization who also have not had true leader development programming. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, unfortunately, that's a huge culture shift and culture
Yeah.
program. Um, and there's people that can help them, but if a company doesn't want to acknowledge that they have a culture problem, there's
Yeah.
there's really not much you can do other than find another job, and sometimes that's the best thing that you can do for yourself.
Yeah. Which is exactly
Unfortunately,
what she did. She
yeah,
ultimately left and is in a much better
yeah,
place now that does have this kind of safety net.
yeah. Unfortunately, there's some organizations that just aren't willing to acknowledge that they're all about the bottom line. They don't really think about the personal aspect, and I don't care what political affiliations anybody has, that's not even my business. But in the federal government right now, that's part of the culture issue is people are feeling unvalued. And
Mm,
I mentioned standing out on Gravelly Point and talking to these divers who their sole job was they were recovering bodies. They kept calling it HR, HR. And I'm thinking, HR to me is I was an HR specialist, human resources. They were talking about human remains. That was their sole
mm,
job. And,
wow.
they didn't really want to download too much on me, but they'd come by and fist bump me and say, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. And that's all. I mean, I stood there. It was like 30 degrees outside, and I was just
Mm,
standing there on the pier by myself in the dark. And they'd come out and, you know, fist bump me a little bit and then go in the tent. And I went and listened to them. And one of them came up to me and he said, thanks for being here. It's nice to know that the organization cares this much because right now, what they were seeing on the news is the government is crap. We're draining the swamp. And here they are diving in,
mm,
icy water. um, and it was just, it's nice to know that you care about the people that are working within the organization. And they were feeling very undervalued. So little things like that. I think one of my slides is those small leadership moments matter.
mhm,
All I was doing was standing there, but they knew why I was there,
mhm.
and it made
Well,
them.
that brings up a question I had earlier, that I hadn't asked yet. How did you, in your role, how did you, um, that was a lot put on you, emotionally, mentally. How did you deal with that at the end of the day so that you
So
could function?
we had to debrief as well.
Okay.
Anytime we deployed somewhere, we
Hmm.
had to speak to one of the leaders within the SISM team within 24 hours of getting
Oh,
back.
okay.
Because
Gotcha.
we were allowed to travel as first responders. So, like, I caught a call one time and said, "Hey, we had a death in the Corps in Mobile, Alabama. Can you head to the airport now and be there, within less than 24 hours?" And I could travel without travel orders and just go use my government credit card and do that. But what it was is a 39-year-old had died. It was a blue collar office. It was a 25 surveyors, boat captains. Two of the guys who worked in the office was this young guy's brother.
Mm.
So it was just like a big family.
Yeah.
It was 25 men and one woman. And they
Mm.
sent me, one of the reasons they asked me to go, even though they had closer peer supporters, is because most of the men in my family are blue collar workers, and they knew that I had that connection with them, and they weren't just sending
Yeah.
somebody who's going to go down there in a suit. I mean, I wore jeans and a t-shirt because that made them more
Right.
comfortable, and I knew that. But
Yeah.
even getting down there and just talking to them, it's just such a big deal to let
Yeah.
people know you care. Their boss said, "Hey, this is voluntary. You don't have to go." Every
Hmm.
one of them showed up. And we just
Wow.
sat in their office all day. I took them donuts, I bought them pizza, and I didn't get reimbursed for that. But
Mm.
by the end of the day, they had a new boat coming in. We had called the headquarters of the Corps of Engineers because I knew these folks and asked them if the office could name the boat. And that
Mm.
was so important to them. They were going to name it after their teammate. And it was just
Wow.
something that they hadn't taken the time to grieve their friend. So they were not functioning well as a team.
Yeah.
Um, but just those few little moments. All it took me was, I mean, they paid me about $2,000 was my trip to go down there for 2 days
Mm.
and just make 26 people more productive and deal with the death of an office mate. So those types of things are important.
Very.
You see my
Thank
little
you.
note at the bottom, you cannot help others if you do not take care of yourself. They made me do a debrief within 24 hours of getting back. I would have to talk to either the command surgeon or his deputy, and they would sit and talk to me and go through this and that and how that make you feel and that kind of stuff. And um, I have not flown since that plane crash, and I used to fly over 20 times a year with my job. I flew a lot because we had sites in 120 different countries. And
Mhm.
so I've flown quite a bit, but I have not flown since that. So Sherry and I are flying to Tampa next week for our cruise. That'll be
Nice.
my first time flying. So I reached out to one of my team leaders in the crisis team back at the Corps of Engineers, and I've been chatting with her a little bit just to get me ready to do it. Because again, I've never been afraid to fly, but it makes me a little nervous right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Next slide. I think we're close to done. The wrap up and call to action. Trauma is more common than we think. Obviously, you've heard some of the stories that I've told, and some of these you wouldn't know unless you talk to people about it. But certainly, some of these things are very real to people and affect their everyday work. You have understanding the changes in behavior. If you know your people really well, you're going to notice if something changes with them. You just are. So, it's like a school teacher. They need to know what 75 different kids a day. That's their job is so hard because you can't treat every kid the same. Well, you can't treat every adult the same either because they're not the same. They're bringing something different. Um, there's my little statement, small leadership moments matter. Just those tiny little things, just I had a lady one time that she liked to hug. Well, you're not supposed to hug at work, especially in a government office. But Teresa was an older lady. She came in every morning and spread out her newspaper, and I'm talking a real newspaper. She did it for about 10 minutes. It got her motivated. I didn't care if she read the newspaper at work. She always liked to hug. I went over there every morning and gave her a hug, asked her if there was anything good on her newspaper, and left her alone for 10 minutes. Then she was productive. It just, just small little things. I just figured that that's what worked for her, and it did. Um, Psychological safety is a performance strategy. And I say that because if people do feel psychologically safe at work and, they feel like they're being heard and they're in a safe culture and they feel safe to share. And it might be something like, that's a pretty good idea. We're going to go in this direction. But if they feel safe to speak it, their performance is going to be better. So it's definitely a performance strategy. If somebody is a bad performer, and you've determined that there's no real issues behind it, then you deal with it through performance. So my call to action on the wrap-up slide is what is one action you can take today or start doing today to lead in a more trauma-informed, as a more trauma-informed leader. For me, I would say a good one would be before correcting behavior, ask what could be the driver. So you can come up with one for yourself, but that would be one that I would recommend. Next slide, please.
And Becky, I'm gonna ask you a question. So, like for a smaller business that may or may not have a robust HR department, do you have recommendations on resources that could be provided to an employee that's struggling with something, whether that is a trauma related to their position or a trauma related to something personal? Because I feel like for me, I work for a small company and we do have HR, but I don't know how much we really have as far as a resource to provide them. So I was wondering if there was outside sources that could be utilized that would be for like a smaller budgeted business that dealt with this type of issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's an organization. The reason I'm looking to the side is because I've got my book right here. It's mental health first aid. I mean, there are always online resources that people can put together, and even a small HR office who's actually trained in HR can put together a one-page list of resources to share with individuals. In crisis, like I told you that I had volunteered for 3.5 years with the crisis text line. If somebody is truly having a crisis moment, um, anybody can dial the number 741-741 on their cell phone. Anybody can, 24 hours a day. And you're going to get a crisis counselor because that's what I did. I was on the other end of that. And it's a secure, as the counselor, I log in from the platform on my computer. It's a very secure log on. They're on their phones. And you usually will get somebody who will chat with you back and forth for 45 minutes and calm you down into a better place. So there are a lot of resources
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
amazing. I didn't even know that that existed.
Yeah, just write it down if you ever, hear a kid, anybody. I mean, my youngest was a 9-year-old who was suicidal, and he was chatting with me saying, you know, he just didn't want to be here anymore because nobody really cared. And I'm like, yeah, I always ask, how old are you? He said, I'm 9. Um, Yeah,
Aw.
you don't ask we don't know who they are, where they are, what their name is. We ask if they want to share their name. If they don't, they don't. So sometimes it's just getting somebody to talk to you, and a lot of times it's people in the middle of the night. They don't have anybody to call. So a lot of the time I used to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning before I would go to work, and I would do the 2 to 4 shift before I would go to work. And it just got to be too much for me with a lot going on. But even a small one-person HR office can get to put together free resources for their employees if they care. You
Yeah.
have that's the part. You have to care. You have to want to do it and knowledgeable enough to do it. So I think I might have one more slide, maybe.
Yep.
No, that's just the end slide. And I know there's only a few people on the call, but if you show this again, if people can provide feedback through that link, I can always update it, do something different, come back and talk to you again on um, a different topic in the same line if you need it. So I would
Yeah, of
appreciate
course.
that. That's also my website. If anybody, like I said, wanted to order the book and do the emotional intelligence, I do the emotional intelligence EQI 2.0. I can do those in businesses where I do individual ones or group and do leadership debriefs so you can see the emotional intelligence in an aggregate level for a group of people. So
Oh,
um,
that's amazing. Thank you so much, Becky.
all of those things are on there, and that is my email address is on there as well. Um, so anybody has any questions, just shoot me an email.
Yeah, did anybody have any questions right now that they'd like to ask live?
No, but
No
I
pressure.
wanted to thank you, Becky, and I'm giggling because I've never seen a code that looks like that. So when you scan that, it takes you to a survey, and we appreciate everyone completing it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for your time, Becky. Thank you everyone for who's on the line. And like always, we will have this loaded to our YouTube channel in a few days and come back again for other webinars. Thank you so much, Becky.
All right, thanks for being here.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.